Hi everyone, my name is Rhonda Mack. I am a senior studying computer science in the College of Arts and Sciences, and I'm here to talk to you about MySpiel. And I have had the honor of being advised by Professor Michael Dowding, who is a writing professor in the College of Communication. So before we begin, I wanted to sort of give a motivating quote that really drove the inspiration behind this project from Tim O'Brien, who is a prolific American writer and amazing storyteller. So it goes a little something like this. The thing about a story is that you dream it as you tell it, hoping that others might then dream along with you. And in this way, memory and imagination and language combine to make spirits in the head. There is this illusion of aliveness. And what O'Brien is communicating here is that stories have an element of magic to them. They are such an important part of our lives, and they're such a powerful tool of communication. They're so ubiquitous in our lives, but we don't really practice storytelling the same way that we practice piano or soccer or whittling. I'm sorry. We tell stories all the time. We share stories over a cup of coffee with our best friend, when we are lecturing to our students in the classroom, or when we're sharing a funny tidbit from last summer at the party in someone's basement. But again, we don't really practice them the same way that we practice soccer, in that it's not very iterative or regimented. So with that, I wanted to address that problem with MySpiel. MySpiel is a web application that provides users a framework to practice their storytelling skills in that regimented, iterative process. And here are my proposed features for this application. Users can record themselves answering a storytelling prompt or their own story. Users can then, once they're done recording their story, they can replay their story and annotate the recording at different timestamps. And users can grade themselves based on a rubric provided by the app that I designed with my advisor. I'll get into the details of how I designed each of these features later in the presentation, but I wanted to spend this time to go over a couple of use cases that I designed. For people who aren't familiar with the term use case, a use case is an imaginary scenario where we as developers sort of see our end users using our products. So I came up with three main ones that I wanted to target while I was writing this project. They go a little something like this. As a student, I want to improve my presentation skills for class presentations on projects. As an educator, I want to improve the way that I explain concepts and ideas. And as a parent, I want to be able to document stories I have for my children and future generations to listen to. So now I'm going to dive into the design process of how I thought about designing each of the features that I mentioned earlier. The first one that I want to talk about is the rubric that I designed. The rubric has two parts. There's a part before you tell your story, and there's a part after. There's a before you begin portion where users sort of get into the right mindset of telling their story before they start it. I used a checklist that the user can check off individual items, and they cannot proceed to tell their story unless they've checked off all the items, or if it's not their first rodeo with the application, they can click a button that says, "I got it, thanks." To move forward. And then after the recording, the user evaluates themselves on each of the items that I outlined in the checklist, and grades themselves based on a 5-point rubric and a couple checklist items. So this is what that before section would have looked like. I designed this in InDesign. Was fun. Basically I wanted the user to have a point that they wanted to reach by the end of their story, and have a roadmap of how to get there, and also to keep their audience in mind and change their story as needed in order to understand, in order to reach their audience in a way that is meaningful to them. And then this is what that rubric looks like after you're done recording your story. So there's a check mark that you can see, that you can check off if you've reached the conclusion that you wanted to reach. And then here are some points that you could grade yourself on. So did you follow a easy to follow path to get to your conclusion, and did you match your audience? And then when you're done grading yourself, this data is saved alongside the recording of your story so that you can pull your story back up in the future and see how you graded yourself and see if you've gotten better since you recorded the story. I also spent a lot of time designing prompts with my advisor. These prompts are usually open-ended questions that that are easy enough for a user to answer, but also structured enough so that a user can write a story or tell a story that has a clear beginning, middle, and end. One such prompt that exemplifies that is, what objects do you carry with you at all times, heavily inspired by the things they carried, which is an amazing book by Tim O'Brien. I also designed a few tips for the user to see when they're recording during the story, and these sort of appear, fade in and out for the user to just kind of keep in mind during the storytelling process. I'm going to skip this slide in the interest of time, because on the next slide, this is sort of what the recording interface would look like. So once they've gotten through that before you begin phase, they can start recording their story. There's a prompt there, what inspires you. There's a waveform that records what's your voice, and then the circle button there is what you would press to record and stop recording. There's a tip up there that would fade in and out as you're recording, and then once you're done, you click the Done Recording button. And then that will take you to the annotation interface. So you can play and pause your recording at different points, and then if you hear something or want to make a note of something that you said during your story, you can pause and then click this annotate button here, the pencil, and that would pop up. I'm not going to move. That would pop up that annotation interface on the right-hand side, where you could, at a minute, 2 minutes and 35 seconds, this user said they went on a tangent here, and they need to integrate it better into their story or get rid of it altogether. And that is saved, and then it will be saved as that little black box on the left-hand side, and the user can tap on those to view those annotations. Lastly, there's that evaluate story button right there, where I showed you that rubric earlier, and that would pop up if you press that button. And then when you save it, all this data gets saved alongside your story in this sort of interface, so you could see what you said about yourself. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the development process. So I use the Media Stream Recording API from Mozilla. They are really awesome people at Mozilla, so it's like heavily documented. It's been really helpful in helping me develop this process. I wrote this in a combination of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I have never learned JavaScript before this project, so it's been a real ride learning all the syntax and all the language kinks that language has. JavaScript is spaghetti, and you should never use it. And I began with a sample application from the Mozilla Development Network that sort of showcased how to use this Media Stream Recording API, and I built upon that project by adding features and deleting features as needed. So this is what it looks like as right now. It's still a work in progress, unfortunately, but this is what it would look like right now. I developed a get random prompt button that displays a random prompt, and then you can keep pressing it until you find a prompt that you feel is suitable. There's a waveform here that records you as you're telling your story, and once you're done telling your story, a story is saved with a little bit of a timestamp in the brackets and then the prompt name. I want to reflect a little bit about this development process. This has been the most involved project I've had to date. I have never written a story from end to end. I mean, I've never written an application from end to end, but it's been really exciting in that I could utilize something from all my fields of study. I spent most of my undergraduate career as a comm minor, which was really fun. So I got to utilize interaction design, copywriting, and back-end programming. So it's a combination of all the things that I've studied here. And I've learned that the software development process is hard, but I'm about to do it for 40 years, so I better get good. But I've had a lot of help. I've had online forums such as Stack Overflow, which has been really awesome in helping me figure out what I'm supposed to do. The Mozilla web documentation, which teaches me how to utilize different endpoints of the Media Stream API, and Google, which has always been my best friend since day one. So thank you very much. I'm not done yet. This is still a work in progress, like I said, but I do plan to finish this because stories have been such an important part of my life for the past decade, maybe, and I plan to finish it. Some future proposed directions is that I want to be able to share stories on social media. I want to be able to embed photo and video into the annotations, and I want to allow users within the MySpiel network to comment on each other's stories. I do plan to share this with all of you once I'm done. I do plan to finish it hopefully by the end of this summer, and I hope that you guys will be able to utilize this tool. So thank you so much, and that's MySpiel on MySpiel. Questions? Yeah.
How How many prompts did you come up with?
How many prompts did I come up with? Thank you, Professor Dowding. I came up with 25 prompts. They're all saved in a text file on my computer. Anyone else? Sam.
Does the app let you record for as long as you want to talk? So like, you know, your prompt could be like a 30-second response or like 30 minutes?
Yep, it's bound by the amount of memory that's on your computer. So you can record for days if your computer allows it. Yeah.
Is it for also your phone? Because I know you just mentioned computer.
So I initially wrote it for desktop, but you could scale. I plan to scale it down. So, ooh, that's a mic. I plan to scale it down for mobile so that you could use it on both mobile and the desktop. Anyone else? Virginia.
So recently there was a website called Calm, C-A-L-M.
Okay.
And what it does is has stories, which are supposed to help one fall asleep.
Oh, okay.
So read by famous authors, and they're supposed to be quite relaxing. So this seems like there's a huge trend towards spoken stories, towards appreciating them. Could you comment on why you think that might be the case in the culture at the moment?
I think now when we live in this world where, in the era of BuzzFeed, we have a lot of very brief, very 5-second snappy stories that we don't really are while they are useful, they are not very. They have a tendency to not be very meaningful because you interact with them so quickly. So these long-winded stories are more meaningful and sort of touch back on like the human experience of what it means to understand stories. We've been telling stories for millennia. Oral tradition has been a means of disseminating information for, again, millennia. So I think that's probably why that trend exists. But I'm just spitballing here. So, Jenya, did you have a question?
Sure. So I know that you aim for this to be kind of a colloquial thing, but do you see, or would you like it to see used in a professional setting, or is that kind of going against your vision?
No, I think there's just there's myriad applications to this tool, so that I can definitely see it being used in a professional setting. But I guess like I've written the software and people are free to use it however they want, and I'd love to see how creative people can get with it moving forward. Any other questions? Neat. All right. Thank you again, everybody.